In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we talk to Remko. We talk about his experience, how to unlock cultural fit, and how important cultural fit is in particular in days of AI. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to the latest episode of HR Visionaries. I'm very much looking forward to my guest today, Remko. It's really good to have you on.
Thank you. Looking forward.
Remko, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Who are you?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Remko. I was actually born in Zambia, Africa, and I moved back to the Netherlands when I was like 2 years old. But certainly my international roots were got started over there. I've outside of that, I been in the field of HR for like 20, 25 years. I actually started my career as an entrepreneur in the first days of the internet bubble. I developed a cultural fit assessment module and company, which was basically able to measure to what extent would I, for example, fit in your company culture or vice versa. I still believe cultural fit is key to hiring, but I would say these days I also value and see the need for cultural add. It's not only about fit, but also add. In other words, what kind of additional diversity do you bring to the pound? In my last roles, I've been working as a chief people officer, mainly in the e-commerce digital field. I worked at Traffics, which is a online travel company, and we sold it to trip.com. Later, I worked for Albelly, which is a photo product company, and I co-led the merger with Photobox. And up to a few months ago, I was actually chief people officer at Happy Horizon, a creative digital agency. And these days, fractional CPO, but also doing some advisory work, leadership development work. And if the right opportunity comes across, obviously jump onto that. I live in Amsterdam, and I would say my key mantra is grow talent.
Well, it's super interesting what you just said around, in the early days of the internet, you developed a tool that helped with cultural fit. Can you tell us a bit more about this? So where did this idea come from, and why did you decide then, to then go to implement this idea?
Yeah, good question. I was pretty young, to be honest, and I did it next to my studies, like many of those young internet entrepreneurs. And I worked in an environment that as a freelancer that was basically advertising vacancies, and you could apply online through that. So it's kind of the first job or vacancy databases. And I thought, this process, looks good, but it still is, bringing talent together and hiring is not so much about qualifications and competencies. And I'm not saying you should ignore them, but I do think it's key when you want to bring on the right talent that there is the right cultural fit. And if that works well, I think that relationship is going to last much longer, and it's also going to be much more productive. So brainstorming on that idea of cultural fit, developed a questionnaire that could measure culture or the desired culture in 6 dimensions and some sub-dimensions, and then basically connected that with a matching engine with all the idea to make sure that there will be a better fit between talent and companies based on cultural fit.
Well, what is cultural fit?
In my view, at that day at least, it was about the congruence in the desired culture and the offered culture. So in other words, looking at some dimensions, trying to identify, are you, for example, more result-oriented or process-oriented, or more normative or versus proactive, and a few more of those dimensions. And then if the congruence, in other words, the overlap was more or less equal, then we could say, hey, there is more cultural fit. And I believe if you would put it in just easy words, it's finding an environment that fits your own values and matches with the values of the company. And if that works, I believe people will be at their best.
What does who does define the values of a company? Perhaps we should start with that first. If we are looking for a match, we should establish both sets of values probably first.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, it's quite funny, I think, when we talk about values, and we typically see that within big but also small companies, kind of, let's say, a couple of slogans or words on a poster or in a manifest or in a document. And whilst I believe that's crucial to summarize and write that down, certainly also write it down because it helps to provide an angle to observe, are we indeed behaving like this? It doesn't always say everything about the culture in an organization. So I believe that in the ideal world, a culture should be shaped, a value should be shaped by probably, let's say, for 2/3 by the leadership team and 1/3 by the rest of the organization. And by the rest of the organization, I mean basically everybody who's involved working in it, all the employees. But I do think there is a bit more responsibility for a leadership team to ensure that it has the right culture, but also it has a culture that continues to evolve, because cultures that don't develop, we typically find in MSIA, and that's not where you want to find your company.
Well, when it comes to culture, I do agree. It's very important to have leaders around who embody strong values and embody strong culture. However, I'm wondering, so for our listeners who may work for an organization where where values don't play a significant role, how can an organization develop into that direction that leaders appreciate? It's not only about revenue, it's not only a profit, it's not only about cost, but people's values are incredibly important too.
Yeah, I agree, and that's not an easy journey, but on the other hand, it's also not that complicated either. I believe that as a company, if you and as certainly as a leadership team, but also other people in the organization, spend some time on answering key and vital questions like what type of company do we want to be? What type of company do we want to be in the future? What do we value? So what do we find important? What do we want to value in the future? What are some key principles for us in the way how we work together or how we collaborate? And what are the things that we would need to add and also want to insert in the company that we don't have today? And in this case, I'm not looking from a, let's say, technical point, but more from how we want to behave and how we want to collaborate. And what is it that we actually need to let go? What did we see in recent projects or recent customer assignments that did not go well? And what was behind that? And if you do that in a kind of a brown bag session and kind of, let's say, write that all down, then it's not that complicated to create a 0.1 version to say so of your value set or who you want to be as a company. And I'm a big believer that you continue to evolve such a document. So it's not like you print it once and then it's finished and done. But I truly believe if you revisit that periodically, so let's say at least once a year and probably even more, then you basically open your perspectives to have it on the radar and continue to develop it.
So you just said, okay, well, it's important to develop those values. Who should be involved in developing?
Yeah, in my view, that's the leadership team. Certainly, also HR leadership or people leadership. I'm not really the person who thinks it should be led by the people team. It can, but it doesn't have to be, because I don't think it's something which is exclusively owned by the CPO or CHRO or the people team. But I do think there needs to be involvement. And if you experience that there is no involvement from the rest of the business, that's probably already a good indicator on what's happening in such an organization.
Well, I must say I found this quite remarkable, given when looking at companies succeeding, companies failing, one can definitely say save off external factors. So if you run a certain business and then politically it's decided, okay, one day, so we don't want this business anymore. Okay, nothing you can do about that. But other than that, it's basically very much culture and leadership who impacts whether a company fails or succeeds.
I agree, and I mean, you probably and also people listening have heard about the phrase "culture eats strategy for breakfast," but I do believe that having the right culture and continue to develop the right culture is something that is of the utmost importance, and also value for business leaders. And eventually, we spent like close to 40 years in a kind of a working environment, whether that's in a job or frictional or an assignment. So and people want to do that in an environment where they fit, where they're appreciated, where they're developed, where they grow. And where they can also identify with the not only the purpose and the cause of such a company, but also with the culture that this organization is basically stimulating. Yeah.
Well, when when asking the questions around what company do we want to be, do you think that most leadership teams are best placed to ask and answer those questions on their own, or should there be external help? Because I picture an organization that, let's say, has for years developed in a certain direction, and perhaps some fresh blood is needed to also recognize some things that are very good that people perhaps underappreciate, and then other things that may go very well, and then also perhaps have a look at these, whether this will be going well forever.
Yeah,
probably won't.
Yeah, well, I do think that it's always good to prevent some kind of company blindness and get the outside view into the room, particularly in some kind of industries where you would see high tenure of executives within the industry. This can sometimes develop into, I wouldn't say create, but let's say develop into some company blindness. Or so in that sense, I think that's helpful. And on the other hand, I would say if you have a healthy attrition rate, and with a healthy attrition rate, I mean that also in your leadership team there is some attrition, which kind of causes outside in view by nature. You will probably be okay without some external support. But I do think it's always good to bring the external view in. Yeah.
What has shaped your values in your career?
My values?
Yes.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I tend to believe that your values are developed and created over time. My personal values are achievement, fun, and purpose. Kind of phrased packaged in my mantra, grow talent. But let's say explaining them, achievement relates to I personally find it important to deliver something, to help an organization, to basically be able to show the delta between start and end point, and in projects to work towards a goal. And I started to value that myself even more, and in my case, probably some couple of examples in my career have developed that even more, and typically that have been larger M&A related activities. Fun from a perspective that this is not fun like we always play, but I do believe that in an environment where you work hard and you're able to also create time and an atmosphere, because I think that's even more important than the time related to it, where people have fun, then you basically are motivated and willing to come back to continue to work on the journey. And purpose relates to trying to do something that basically creates a better world. In essence, that's probably in my case goes back to Africa. But so yeah, that has kind of, let's say, had the impact with me. Yeah.
Well, how did you discover that those values are very very important to you? I think when I talk to people, it's very often the case that people, find it hard to articulate those values. So they kind of know what kind of things are important to them. However, basically saying, as you just said, those three things are very important that define my personality, at least in a work environment. That is, these three words define me.
Yeah. Yeah. Here actually,
because maybe I could add. So if one would ask me, okay, what are your three top values? I'm actually not entirely sure I could answer that straight away, because I would be like, okay, for me it's important. Performance, integrity, listening, and I could list like 20 things more, and then when I'm at the 20th, I would be like, okay, I actually have 20 more. So how did you define those three for yourself?
No, that's a good question, Benjamin. I think it goes back to my passion for culture, which started when I started my own career and diving more into corporate culture, but also culture as a thing. Actually, during my time at Swarovski, I was delivering as part of the leadership development programs that I was leading, delivering some workshops in those programs around culture and the company culture. And whilst initially these workshops were pretty much, these are kind of the corporate values and this is what is meant with it, I started to find out for myself and do a bit of soul searching. But hey, that's great. But what identifies me in the work environment and also outside of that? Because I don't think there's a huge difference between the two of them, actually. And I did some soul searching and started to write down and writing down basically, with a old-fashioned notebook, so not a computer, but a notebook, reflecting and writing down. And then initially you get to, let's say, 7 or 8 kind of key statements or key, and then you work out for yourself which are the most important and the most critical. And that doesn't mean that the other words that are no longer in the top 3 are not relevant, but it's more kind of prioritizing.
Well, it's actually quite remarkable what you said. You have to basically take the time and develop this for yourself. Can you perhaps let us a bit into your way of thinking there? So when you discover those values for you, or when you thought about those values, how did you you sat down with a notebook and how did you approach this? So to make sure that after, let's say, 2 or 3 hours, the notebook is hopefully not empty.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it was probably more, let's say, shorter sessions of let's say 20 to 30 minutes, and I had the luxury at that time to spend a lot of times in leadership development resorts is probably not the right word, but like in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, with beautiful views. taking a walk and then sitting down somewhere on a bench and looking at a beautiful lake and write down and then pick up the notebook again 1 or 2 days or 3 days later and reflect upon it. So I don't believe it's something you do kind of, let's say, between 9 to 12 and then you've got it. No, you need to revisit a couple of times and then you identify yourself with, or you find out where you identify yourself most with and what fits you well. And I think the value of it is, again, also these develop, like I said as well. But I think the value of it is this, that you can proclaim them and communicate them and explain to other people also how that influences behavior.
Well, the when you think about those values you figure out for yourself, when you talk to other people, how do you make sure that you find out what people value very much, and how do you how do you approach this?
What I typically tend to do is formulate a couple of key questions and ask people to write down answers, and then change scenery. And with change scenery, in the case of people exploring their own purpose, their own value set, I do believe it works to sit down and answer a couple of key questions, and then to take them literally on a hike or in a walk, whatever you want to call it, and talk them over. And why is that? Because if you keep on thinking in continuously the same context and also in the same environment, literally context, then you often have less ability to spontaneously connect with other perspectives, and hence I'm a big fan of doing this in 2 to 3 sessions, sit down, walk, and then confirm.
What were the most remarkable situations you entered into when you ask these questions, when you ask people, please take the time and let's investigate together?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm just thinking out loud at the moment. I don't know whether it was most remarkable, but I did experience that some people felt a little bit uncomfortable with between brackets this type of soul searching. And soul searching is probably too big of a word, but because typically in a business environment, you're thinking of the next project, the next client assignment, the next year's budget, the strategy, and this is basically much more about you, and it comes from the perspective that I believe when you want to lead others, you first need to be able to lead yourself. That's the perspective. So I think not most remarkable, but the initial between brackets resistance of uncomfortability with the assignment, and then going through this process, experiencing people who have been able to basically put together in a couple of words or statements what drives them, and typically this has helped people to be a bit more prepared, but also more centered to who they are and what they want to achieve.
Well, the question you just asked, or the fact you just mentioned, okay, people who want to lead others should first of all learn to lead themselves. I think it's a very it's very remarkable indeed that there are some people who are kind of, it feels like naturally born leaders, and other people who can perform tasks very well, however terribly struggle when it comes to leading people
Yeah.
because, well, they may be good at some things and maybe very successful in these things, executing tasks very relentlessly, for example. However, well, leading people and understanding people's needs and listening to people is was very hard for them.
Yeah, that I've also observed that in let's say corporate life or business life, whatever you want to call it. And I think we've all seen and experienced the examples of promoting the fantastic top performer to the leadership position, and then finding out that he was indeed or she was indeed a good performer in that prior role, but not in leading a team or leading a people. And particularly, I've seen that a lot in scale up slash businesses that have grown fast and where the promotions were typically associated with high performance in past roles. So yeah, I recognize that, and I don't think, to be honest, I think it's a combination of nature and nurture. So what makes a good leader. But it certainly starts with a perspective of, hey, it's about the team and not about you anymore. And that's something that I've seen working well, but also I've seen that not working well so much. And I used to have a CEO and who I learned a lot from, and he said, he shared with me, the first thing I do when I either see or identify a new type of assignment or type of thing to do, the first thing I do, he said, is think about who can I give this to whom can I give it, so that in essence I can care to absorb so much, well, not so much, but a high amount of work without being the one who's performing all the labor myself. Yeah.
Well, Remko, I'm wondering, so in a world where, well, many of people's tasks can be, or will be done in the future by computers, being it AI, being it plain automation, the people function will become much more important going forward.
Yeah, I tend to believe so as well. I also think that the people function will value a lot from the benefits of well-educated, well-trained, well-developed AI. And in that sense, I think that balancing what the business needs to in order to perform and what the individual employee needs to continue to develop, to continue to be employable, and to also prosper a career is a skill that just will need to be even bigger in the future.
Well, what do you think will you mentioned before cultural fit and cultural add. Can you tell us a bit more about what you mean with cultural add, in particular in the light of all the changes and everything we will experience probably in the next few years?
Yeah, what I mean with the concept of cultural add is actually all about enriching, growing, and diversifying in a context and an environment. And I think that one of the main challenges in hiring is to overcome that bias and not to hire those mini-me's. In other words, the people who look like you, and I'm not even talking about literally, but also in terms of who may have the same type of capabilities. And that's the sometimes if you go down the road of for example cultural fit, you may forget that you also need to inject different type of capabilities, different type of cultural insights, different types of experiences to be able to create a team that will be successful in the future. And that's something that I find very important, that hence I kind of probably the word somewhere exists, but I just like the word cultural add. So what does someone add to a culture? And I think that's a great way to look at in hiring processes, what someone bringing to the process, to the organization that's not yet there.
Can one also say that, well, cultural add means something like, well, a diversity of ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's diversity of ideas and diversity in many other aspects, but certainly the diversity of thinking and the diversity of ideas is crucial. And sometimes you may observe in companies that certainly companies that have had lower levels of attrition, that the way of thinking has become pretty unifocused, and particularly in those kind of situations and environments, it's extremely important to add different thoughts and different thinking. And I don't think there are many industries actually that don't need that, to be honest.
Well, if all have the same opinion, this opinion should better be right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it can turn out to be very dangerous for the existence of the company.
Yeah, and that's true, and that's I think let's say a widespread of ideas and different thinking, and that's where, hence, for example, I also in my own teams, I want to build the resistance to say so, because nothing is so dangerous as the leader who's so self-convinced and doesn't get any resistance.
How can you establish a culture of well, leaders being challenged by their team? Well, obviously, you also don't want a culture where everything is, well, every little change is debated for ages. But you need to find like a very solid middle ground.
True, and we don't want to end up like, between brackets, politicians. We also need to deliver something or achieve something in terms of my own value set. So I agree with that. But I do think that one can create such an environment by actively inviting other opinions and other people to the debate, and also by empathizing with other opinions, and isolate yourself from your own view, and stepping into the shoes of someone else, and value what he or she is bringing forward to the play or to the game. And often in the business world that we operate in, there's many directions to get to Rome, and it's certainly healthy to explore those options. And then at a certain moment, you need to kind of, let's say, tailor a plan A or plan B. But at least if you have done and have also looked at a problem from multiple angles, then you know when to take out plan C or plan D from the drawer.
When you picture HR in, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years, what do you see?
In my view, I would see a function / a team or a unit, whatever you want to call it, extremely close to what's happening in the organization, co-steering the organization with a tremendous focus on developing and supporting the strategy moving forward, very savvy in identifying the talent that is needed to be successful, with the majority of operational work automated / AI mated. I'm not sure whether that's a verb, but but let's say the areas of benefits, admin, payroll, and transactional side of HR will continue to exist, and it will certainly need to continue to have some people observing and monitoring it. but I do believe that in essence, the HR job will become much more attractive and less admin driven.
What do HR teams need to do now to prepare for this future? Since, well, a lot of things you mentioned require lots of preparation, I guess.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things that the first one is experiment. Experiment. And when I say experiment with new techniques, with new solutions, experiment with AI wherever you can, learn from it. And if it works, basically continue to invest or accelerate in it. The second thing is, I think, become extremely business savvy. So also in the teams that I've worked with, I find it very important that my team members have a sound understanding of how a company makes money, where the biggest value drivers are, what are the value drivers of the future, and understanding that game and being extremely close to it. And probably, let's say, derive from these two things, I think, yes, people, or the HR business or people business is about people, but I do think people need to be extremely savvy also with numbers.
How do you get your team there? So let's say you are a business, you're an HR leader in a medium-sized company, and well, some things you mentioned, like, well, we have to get very data-driven, and well, the numbers science, well, data in the end, and being very focused on on business development. How do you get your organization there?
Yeah, by incentivizing, and not literally incentivizing in terms of putting money to it, but supporting this direction, by also in a positive way, of course, demanding the team to focus on it. So each time when we would come out with a new proposal or a new plan, I'd like to see the financials of it. In other words, the numbers, what's the impact, what's the value. By developing people's capabilities in this area. And of course, also last but I wouldn't say last but not least, but very relevant is by selecting upon these capabilities. So, I mean, you can develop whatever you want, but if you have selected the wrong people, then it's going to be a tremendous challenge to get there.
Indeed. Remko, thank you so much for your time. It was super interesting listening to you. Much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you guys for listening in, and see you next time.